If you love adventure, you really love this book, Deltora Quest. I wanted to talk a little bit before we started about getting to know the world. So what about the setting? What kind of place is this? They don't have electricity. He lit a candle. But they have magic. They have gems with power. What are the rules here? So how do things work? What about the magic? Don't know too much about how those gems work yet, do we? Except we know about the belt and the person who made it now, because we learned alongside the main character. Who has the power? Who opposes it? So right now I think that Jared is worried that the power that used to belong to the king and has gone down through the ages has gotten weaker and weaker as these advisors have made more and more rules that weaken the king's power. And the power seems to lie in the belt. And who controls it? It's a really good story, isn't it? Okay, here we go. When last we left him, he was in the cart with the garbage. The rubbish cart was beneath him now. He waited till just the right moment, then dropped lightly onto the back, burrowing quickly into the sticky mess of scraps until he was completely covered. The smell nearly made him choke. He screwed his eyes shut and held his breath. He could hear the sound of horses' feet. He could hear the distant shouting of the guards searching for him, and at last he could hear the sound of the first pair of great wooden gates creaking open. His heart thudded as the cart trundled on. Then he heard the gates closing behind him and the second pair of gates opening. Soon, soon. The cart moved on, swaying and jolting. With a creak, the second pair of gates slammed shut, and then Jared knew that for the first time in his life, he was outside the palace walls. The cart was trundling down the hill now. Soon he would actually be in the beautiful city he had so often seen from his window. He had to look. His curiosity was too great. Slowly he wiggled until his eyes and nose were above the mound of scraps. He was facing back towards the palace. He could see the wall and the gates. He could see the top of the hollow, but Jared squinted in puzzlement. Why could he not see the turrets of the palace or the tops of the trees in the gardens? Above the wall there was only a shining mist. He thought his eyes were at fault and he rubbed them, but the mist did not disappear. Confused, he turned his head to look down towards the city, and his shock, dismay, and horror were so great he almost cried out, for instead of beauty, he saw ruin. The fine buildings were crumbling. The roads were filled with holes. The grain fields were brown and choked with weeds. The trees were stunted and bent. Waiting at the bottom of the hill was a crowd of thin and ragged people carrying baskets and bags. Jared began struggling to free himself from the rubbish. In his confusion, he no longer cared if the driver of the cart heard him or not, but the old man did not look around. Jared realized he was deaf. Unable to speak, too, no doubt, for he had not uttered a word, even to the horse. Jared leapt from the back of the cart and rolled into a ditch at the side of the road, and he lay watching as the cart moved on to the bottom of the hill and stopped. The old man sat staring ahead of him, while the ragged people swarmed onto the pile of rubbish. Jared saw them fighting over one another for scraps from the palace table, stuffing old bones, crusts, and vegetable peelings into their baskets and into their mouths. They were starving. Sick at heart, Jared looked back at the palace. From here, he could just see the tips of the palace turrets rising above that shimmering mist. Endon must be looking from his window at this moment, staring down at the city. He'd be seeing peace, beauty, and plenty. He would be seeing a lie created by pictures on a misty screen. For how many years had this evil magic blinded the eyes of the kings and queens of Deltora? And who had created it? Words from the book came to Jared's mind, and he shuddered with dread. The enemy is clever and sly, and to its anger and envy 1,000 years is like the blink of an eye. The Shadow Lord was stirring. Afterwards, Jared could barely remember scrambling from the ditch. He could not remember stumbling through the tangled weeds and thorny bushes beyond the road. He did not know what guided him to the blacksmith's forge, where at last he fell, fainting, to the ground. Perhaps he saw the glow of the fire. Perhaps he heard the hammer beating on the red-hot metal, and the sound reminded him of his lessons with Endon. Or perhaps the spirit of Aiden was looking after him. For Crane, the blacksmith, stubborn and fearless, was perhaps the only man in Dell who would have taken him in. Crane roused him and helped him into the small house behind the forge. At Crane's call, a sweet-faced girl came running. Her eyes were full of questions, but she was silent as she helped Crane give Jared water and bread and bathe his cuts and scratches. They took his filthy, torn clothes, gave him a long, plain nightshirt, and tucked him into a narrow bed. And then Jared slept. When he woke, the great hammer was ringing on metal once more. The girl was singing in the kitchen, and the sun was setting. He had slept the day through. At the end of his bed, he found a set of clothes. He pulled them on, tidied the bed, and crept outside. He found Crane at work in the forge. The old man turned and looked at him without speaking. "I thank you for your kindness with all my heart," Jared said awkwardly. "I will leave now. I do not want to cause you trouble, but I beg you not to say I was here if the palace guards come searching. They will tell you I tried to kill the new king, but I did not do it." "So much the worse," the old man answered grimly, returning to his work. "Many in Dell would thank you if you had." Jared caught his breath. So this was how things were. The king was not loved but hated, and no wonder. As far as his people knew, he lived in luxury behind his high walls while they suffered. They did not understand that he had no idea of their trouble. "The guards will not come," the old man said without turning. "I threw your clothes over a cliff into the sea and watched as the guards found them. They think that you are drowned." Jared did not know what to say. He saw that Crane had finished the horseshoe he had been hammering. Without thinking, he picked up heavy tongs beside the forge and stepped forward. Crane glanced at him in surprise, but let him pick up the shoes and dip it in the barrel of water standing nearby. The water hissed and bubbled as the iron cooled. "You've done this work before," the man murmured. "A little," Jared nodded, he said. He carefully lifted the horseshoe from the water and laid it aside. "I am old," Crane said, watching him. "My son, whose clothes you are wearing now, was killed 3 years ago. His dear wife died before him when their child was born. I have only the child Anna now. We live simply, but there is always food on the table and will be while I keep my strength." He glanced down at Jared's hands, soft and white, with long, rounded nails. "You could stay here, boy, but you would have to work hard to earn your keep. Could you do it?" "I could," Jared said strongly. Nothing could please him more than to stay. He liked the old blacksmith. He liked the calm, sweet-faced Anna. Here, too, he would be close to the palace. He could do nothing for Endon now except to keep watch, but he had vowed that this he would do. Prandine thought he was dead, but he would be unlikely to tell Endon so. It would suit his purpose better to let the king think Jared was alive and dangerous. If he feared for his life, Endon would be even more willing to do exactly as he was told. But one day Endon may realize that after all I was right, thought Jared. One day he may call me, and if ever that happens, I will be ready. So it was settled. Jared took shears and cut off the long plaits of hair that marked him so plainly as coming from the palace, and after that every day he worked in the forge. He already knew how to hammer hot iron and steel to make fine swords and shields. Now he had to learn to make simpler things like horseshoes, axes, and blades for plows. But this he did quickly, and as his muscles hardened and his soft hands grew tough, he took over more and more of the blacksmith's work. The forge was busy, but still Crane and Anna were poor. Jared soon discovered that this was because most of the people in Dell were even poorer and could pay little for the work the blacksmith did for them. Some, indeed, could give nothing, and these Crane would help all the same, saying, "Pay me when you can." By the second day, Jared had realized with a sinking heart that everything he and Endon had been taught about life outside the palace was a lie. The city was a place of hunger, illness, struggle. Beyond its walls, strange, terrible beasts and bands of robbers prowled. For many years, no news had come to the towns and villages scattered through the countryside. Many people were weak with hunger. Yet it was said that in the dead of the night, heavily guarded carts piled high with food and drink trundled into the city and up to the palace gates. No one knew where the carts came from. "Somewhere far away, in any case," Crane muttered as they sat by the fire on a second night. "Such luxuries could not be found here." "It is said that Deltora was once a land of plenty and peace," Anna added, "but that was a long time ago." "The new king knows nothing of this," Jared cried. "Neither did the old king. You should have told him." "Told him?" Crane growled angrily. "We told him time and again." He swung around in his chair and pulled out an old tin box from the shelf. He thrust the box at Jared. "Open it," he ordered. Jared lifted the lid of the box. Inside were many small rolls of parchment, edged with gold. Confused, he picked out one of the rolls and straightened it. The king thanks you for your message. He will attend to your request when time allows. Alton. Frowning, Jared thrust the parchment back into the box and picked out another. It was exactly the same, and so was the next, and he looked at it and the next. The only difference in the fourth was it spoke of the queen instead of the king, and was signed Lilia. Queen Lilia had been Alton's mother, Jared remembered. He scrabbled through the parchments. There were hundreds of them, all stamped with the royal seal. Some were much older than others, signed with royal names he remembered from his history lessons. They're all the same, Crane said, watching him reading one after the other. The only difference between them is the name at the bottom. For centuries, messages have been sent to the palace begging for help, and these accursed parchments are all that the people have ever received in return. Nothing has ever been done. Nothing. Jared's throat tightened with pain and anger. King Alton at least never received your message, Crane, he said as calmly as he could. I think they were kept from him by his chief advisor, a man called Prandine. The king signed these replies and fixed them to his royal seal, Crane pointed out coldly, flicking his finger at the box, as did his mother and grandfather before him. It is the rule, the custom, that the chief advisor prepares all replies for the king to sign, exclaimed Jared. The old king signed and sealed whatever Prandine put in front of him. Then he was a fool and a weakling, Crane snapped back, as no doubt his son is also. Endon will be as useless to us as his father. I fear for Deltora, he muttered. We are now so weak that should an invasion come from the Shadowlands, we could do nothing to protect ourselves. The Shadow Lord will not invade, grandfather, Anna soothed. Not while the belt of Deltora protects us, and our king guards the belt. That, at least, he does for us. Jared felt a chill of fear, but he could not bring himself to tell Anna she was wrong. If she found out that the king did not wear the belt, but it kept it shut away under the care of others, she would lose the last of her hope.